When our brain chooses muscles to do work, there is another principle. It will always choose muscles with good endurance first. Why does it choose muscles with good endurance? Because they can last longer, meaning it will definitely choose muscles that do not get tired easily. In other words, when my brain wants to stabilize the cervical spine, it will definitely not choose the upper trapezius muscle because the upper trapezius muscle gets fatigued too easily. So, when our brain wants to maintain shoulder joint stability, it will definitely not choose the deltoid muscle, and when it wants to maintain pelvic stability, it will definitely not choose the gluteus maximus. Because there is a principle. It first chooses the most fatigue-resistant muscles, then the moderately fatigue-resistant ones, and only when these two cannot be chosen will it choose the most easily fatigued ones. The most easily fatigued muscles have a characteristic. They have the greatest strength and the strongest explosiveness, but at the same time, they have the poorest endurance. In other words, this is why, during practice, we first train the so-called core stabilizing muscles, because they are the most fatigue-resistant, rather than first activating the erector spinae or the upper trapezius. Then, given this principle, you look at the cycles within the bone structure, and then you look at the hip joint's flexion and extension angles. Normally, the maximum hip flexion angle is 120 degrees, and the hip extension angle can reach 30 degrees. This means that during walking, whether I should use a hip strategy or an ankle strategy depends on the percentage of my hip flexion angle relative to the maximum hip flexion angle. So if when I walk, my maximum hip flexion angle is 20 degrees, and my normal maximum joint hip flexion range is 120 degrees, it means that when I walk, I am only using 1/6 of my maximum joint range of motion. This also means that the smaller my hip flexion angle, the less my gluteal muscles are stretched. The less they are stretched, the less I should bear weight. This is the most basic concept. That's why when I do squats, squatting like this can train the glutes, but squatting straight down trains the quadriceps, because my glutes are not stretched as much as the quadriceps. The more something is stretched, the more it activates. It's a very simple principle. And then, take a look here. This is the ankle joint. While walking, my dorsiflexion can reach 10 degrees. The maximum dorsiflexion angle for women is 30 degrees, and for men, it's 25 degrees. So even if we consider it as 30 degrees, my dorsiflexion angle during walking accounts for 1/3 of the maximum joint movement. One is 1/6, and the other is 1/3. Then look at its lateral flexion angle, which is 15 degrees. This means that both my dorsiflexion and lateral flexion occupy a greater proportion of their maximum joint movement compared to the hip joint. This means that during walking, the activation of my ankle and calf muscles is bound to be greater than that of the hip joint. This is why walking is primarily ankle-driven. Now let me show you this saying. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Do you think you understand this principle? Let me tell you. What does it really mean to convey? It conveys two meanings. The first is that even if you have walked 1,000 miles, every step you take forward still starts with your feet. Our ancestors discovered that no matter how far you walk, it doesn't matter which muscles you use, you still have to use your feet. That's why it said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and not that because you've walked 1,000 miles, you should use your heart instead. If your feet can't do it, you don't switch to using your heart. This is what it wants to convey. The second layer of meaning it wants to express is that no matter how big your business becomes, or how long you intend to continue with something, you must start with a solid foundation, step by step. This is what it wants to convey, rather than the interpretation you might have of a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This is why I say that the simple words of our ancestors contain very profound meanings and deep truths. So, never use other means just because you want to go further. So, what does step by step mean? It tells you that only by taking one step at a time can you go far and have the possibility of success. Then, the faster you walk, once your feet have moved, there are no footprints left, which means you've lost your way, your breathing is off, you're more anxious, you find direction ruthlessly, and you enter the state of Tai Chi earlier, indicating that your achievements are temporary and unstable. This is the principle of taking one step at a time. People often say, "Oh, I can't walk anymore, I can't move my legs." What does it mean when you can't move your legs? It means the hip flexor muscles are weak. What else does it mean? It also means that when he walks, he doesn't start from the feet, but from the hip joint, which is why he can't move his legs. In other words, anyone who can't walk long distances is using a hip strategy rather than an ankle strategy. Anyone who describes not being able to move their legs is actually explaining the most profound principles of rehabilitation in plain language. The patient doesn't understand the principles. They are simply describing their feelings in everyday language. So the more you practice those things, the more you'll encounter problems that shouldn't appear at your age. Then yesterday, one of our classmates, a classmate from our class, had quite severe hemorrhoids in high school. The day before, a classmate directly shared that they started experiencing rectal bleeding at 16 and had hemorrhoid surgery at that age. These symptoms shouldn't appear at such a youthful age. So, many times, we don't know why this result occurs, but in fact, there is a cause for every effect. In other words, our children nowadays basically use a broad strategy from a young age because the paths they walk on are too smooth, their shoes are too good, and they lack external environmental stimuli. So, what do they practice more? They practice dancing, opening their chests, opening their hips, and more often practice strategies dominated by the hip joint, which has become the norm for children today. Out of 10 children who come to our Shanghai studio, 9 are hyperactive. All the parents say their child has ADHD, and their sympathetic nervous system is too excited. Additionally, you will notice that the vast majority of female members, or female trainers with a peach-shaped butt, have this kind of appearance. The top is a very full peach-shaped butt, while the bottom is very flat feet with eversion. This top and bottom do not match. This means that the more you enhance the top, the more the bottom deteriorates, which is the causal relationship between them. In other words, whenever you see such a butt and such feet, it is 100% indicative of a low diaphragm position and a low pelvic floor position. This means that when walking, it is 100% using a wide strategy, not an ankle strategy. And it also means that when standing, it uses a wide strategy. Many people have also asked why the left buttock is higher than the right. As I explained in August, it's because in most cases, we bear weight on the right side. When the weight is on the right, the base of the spine tilts to the right, causing the tailbone to swing to the left. This means that for the vast majority of people, the lower part of the left gluteus maximus is shortened, and the left piriformis muscle is also shortened. This part, you see, what does this part represent? This part represents the rectus abdominis muscle. Normally, this part should be in the middle, which means the rectus abdominis muscle of your base bone is in the middle. If it shifts to the left, it indicates that the base bone has been pulled back by the lower part of your left gluteus maximus. Therefore, many hemorrhoids protrude from the left side. The lump on the left side is like this because it indicates that your left pelvic floor muscle is lower. In this situation, should you stretch the lower part of the left gluteus maximus? Actually, it's not necessary because we will discuss this later. So, what are we going to do in the afternoon after discussing this theory in the morning? In the afternoon, I will teach you how to suppress your wide strategy, how to promote your ankle strategy, and how to manage your heart rate and breathing while standing.